Hello everyone, this is OddJob here. In today's video, I want to talk a little bit about gameplay theory. This is something that is completely made up, it's all speculation, but in order to actually talk about future gameplay theories that I would love to see in the game, we kind of have to build it on top of a foundation in order to talk about really cool elements that we might be able to see in Star Citizen. If you've ever played D&D or any type of role-playing game, you know that any type of really cool gameplay has to rely on some core fundamentals, and everything has to go back to those fundamentals in order to make the whole gameplay very cohesive. This is something that's just really fun to do because Star Citizen is such a huge video game in terms of its scope and size. Being able to speculate on the gameplay of this is just kind of fun and enjoyable as we wait for the game to be completed. So let's go ahead and dive into some gameplay theory. So in this video, we're going to be talking about permadeath, which is something CIG has already talked about. The only issue with this is that they've been kind of squishy on this. They say one thing and then they say another, and it doesn't really match up, so it leaves us a little bit confused, and I think even they don't really have a particular direction in this. And for the purposes of my video, I'm going to go ahead and kind of define what it means to me so that when I talk about it or in context of gameplay, you kind of know where I'm coming from, and you can always refer to this video. But for my background, I am a big Diablo player and I play hardcore. So for anybody who doesn't know what that is, basically you play a game in which there is permadeath, as in once you die, you permanently die and you lose all of your gear, and it happens all the time. It's a very fun game to play like that. It can also be super frustrating. I think I have lost hundreds of characters in my time playing Diablo, and what I would say is 15% of the time it's me doing something really dumb and then me dying from it. Another 25% of the time is just running across a mob that outright kills me. That does happen because you are playing in very hard game modes, and the rest of the time it's just due to lag, player hacks, things that I can't control. Those things are super frustrating, but that's just part of the gameplay, and you just get used to it. The first time you permadeath die is always the most frustrating, but as time goes on, as you play more, you just kind of get used to it. But it is a very adrenaline-filled gameplay, and for players like me, I really do like gameplay like that because there's just a certain risk factor that you can't really reproduce in any other games. So for the purposes of this video, what I would say permadeath is basically you lose everything that you don't have lifetime insurance on, because you can't lose those things, which is totally fine. So in my example, much like me playing Diablo, when you're playing a character at the very low levels, when you lose that character, it's really largely meaningless. You're not really losing a whole lot. So for example, if you're playing a player like a grunt, or somebody manning a Nova tank or something, if you permadie, you don't really lose that much. You can continue to permadie and it really doesn't affect your gameplay. If you're running a small family business, again, if you die, you probably won't lose much at all anyways because you own that business. The next character in line most likely will be a character in that family, so you just take over, you continue on. Largely you'll be unaffected. Where permadeath becomes really insanely important is if you have a lot of power, or if you have a lot of reputation. At this point, you have to be very careful in how you play. So I kind of broke this down into 3 examples, which is racing, organizations like your high up VPs, and also any type of military leadership. So for racing, if you're just racing for fun and you're not really winning any championships, you largely will not be affected if you die for any particular reasons. The only time this would affect you is if you actually started winning a lot of championships and you start getting exclusive access to higher race leagues or special game modes. If you were to die, then your player is dead and you lose access to those leagues because your player has died. You're going to have to start back from the beginning and work your way back up. Now, if you have the skills, and most likely you'll still have the same ships, you should be able to work your way back up pretty easily, but again, it'll be the grind all the way back up because that is a complete player loss, and that's something you're going to have to accept. It's going to change how you're going to play the game as you become increasingly more successful. That's the whole point of it, and that's what makes it exciting. Now, when it comes to organizations, how I'm going to present it probably isn't going to be very popular to a lot of players, but what I would say is that when a player starts an organization, say he's the CEO, if he builds that up to be a mega organization and he has all of the power, in other words, his user interface has all of the abilities to make vast changes within his organization. If he or she were to for some reason die, whether he was assassinated, his ship blew up, bad luck, whatever it may be, and they weren't able to revive him, he or she would actually lose access to that interface. In other words, the player that comes up will no longer be the CEO of that organization. In other words, the next player that he plays, it will not be the CEO of that organization. He may have a prominent place in the organization. In other words, if he wants to step back into CEO role, he has a shorter road to go, but it's going to be the next person up that's going to be CEO. So what that means is that the change in leadership based on a character death is actually meaningful, and this is something that I think most organizations would fight against, but I think it would actually be very interesting gameplay, and I really hope that they do something similar to this. I'm probably being overly harsh, and they're probably never going to implement something fully to this degree, but it would make the gameplay very interesting, and it would also make ships like the 890 jump much more valuable. In other words, there's a reason why that ship has capital engines and 2 capital shielding, is because the life of that CEO is actually super important. If that character dies, there is actually going to be a shift in the balance of power within an organization. But for the purposes of my gameplay and my speculation, I'm going to leave permadeath as in real permadeath, just because it's going to be more vastly interesting to talk about that than a soft death in which the CEO will come back as a new character and he's still the CEO, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but it is just still a video game. The last organization I want to talk about, which is a PMC or maybe the UE, we don't really know much about that, but for anybody who's playing a private military organization, you most likely will have a chain of command, and it should be enforced in the game mechanics of the game. And again, much like what I said with the organization and the CEO example that I gave, if you were to die and you're a high-ranking officer, you would lose that rank. Maybe you would have a position that's a little bit further up, but you should definitely start lower to the bottom, and basically you would have to work your way back up, much like you would in the other example that I just gave. Again, probably not going to happen, but I really feel like that would be much more interesting gameplay, and it would be much more realistic, and it would provide a reason to avoid permadeath. Now, I personally do like permadeath mechanics, and I do like them to be overly harsh, but I know a lot of gamers don't. But for the purposes of my video, I'm just going to leave it at harsh because that's what I like it as. Again, if you have any suggestions or comments, go ahead and leave in the comments below. Please keep it civil, and I will talk to you in the next video.